Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because, man, we are diving into something truly fascinating. We're looking at the enigmatic Moody's Liber, literally translated as the wordless book. Published way back in 1677 in La Rochelle, this thing is a massive foundational text in Hermetic philosophy. But here's the crazy catch. It has absolutely zero printed text. The whole shebang is composed almost entirely of 15 engraved plates, just pictures. So that immediately brings up the central mystery of our explainer today. I mean, how on earth do you read a book with absolutely no words? As we go through this, I really want to challenge you to think about how a purely visual language can actually communicate incredibly complex cosmic and chemical truths. Like, how can an author teach you the literal secrets of the universe without writing a single solitary sentence? It's like a giant puzzle. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for peeling this onion. We'll hit 1, the wordless mystery, 2, visualizing the cosmos, 3, the laboratory secret, 4, the inner transformation, and finally, 5, the hermetic cosmos. Let's get to it. Kicking things off with part 1, the wordless mystery, context of the Mutus Liber. So while the earlier pages of this book act as sort of a gentle wake-up call to the sleeping adept, Plate 3 absolutely blows the doors off. It expands the stage massively. What we're looking at here is a map of the grand silent flow of divine energy, starting from the macrocosm, the entire universe, all the way down to the microcosm, which is our human realm. This one single image boldly attempts to chart the descent of divine energy through the elements right down into physical, tangible matter. Moving right along to section 2, visualizing the cosmos, the concentric rings. Now I want you to draw your eyes to the outermost ring framing the whole image. These concentric oval bands, they actually represent the classical, highly structured hierarchy of the cosmos, layered realm by realm. Up at the very top, we've got Jupiter with his eagle. He represents the divine masculine, the active spirit, the solar principle. And directly across from him sits Juno, who represents the divine feminine and the receptive soul. Now notice how Juno is pointing downward? That's a huge detail. It signifies spirit beginning its descent into matter. And you see her peacock? That represents the multicolored cauda pavonis, or peacock's tail, which in alchemy marks the exact moment a transformation reaches full maturity. Now, as we glide inward to the middle and inner rings, we're entering the volatile realm. We see all these birds in flight, which represent volatile substances, spiritualization, and the element of air. And right below them, you've got fishermen stationed on land and in boats, literally casting their nets. But here's the amazing part. They are definitely not fishing for their dinner. They're trying to catch the elusive spiritus mundi, the spirit of the world, pulling it straight from the air and water before it can escape back up into the cosmos. Plunging into the central sphere, we find Neptune riding a chariot drawn by sea monsters through these really dark, turbulent waters. He's the ruler of the prima materia, the primordial chaos. Take a close look at his trident. This brilliantly illustrates the threefold nature of the great work in alchemy: salt, sulfur, and mercury. To early chemists, you have to remember, these weren't just standard elements on a periodic table. They were the foundational, divine building blocks of the entire universe. Now look at the very bottom, right beneath the feet of Hermes. We find this microcosm inset, floating inside what looks like a glass sphere, or maybe a dewdrop. Inside it, birds are flying toward the sun and moon, and they're carrying these very specific symbols in their beaks. One has the sigil for Libra, which means balance, and another carries the sign for sulfur, or salt. What is so fascinating here is the realization that this isn't just a map, it's actually a cosmic calendar. You can't just harvest the spirit anytime you feel like it. It requires highly specific astrological alignments, specifically the spring equinox. Which brings us to our first real analytical lens, Section 3, the laboratory secret, physical alchemy. Let's completely shift our perspective for a second from the grand cosmic scale down to the incredibly practical. When you look at this through a physical lens, this mystical piece of art becomes a literal, step-by-step instructional manual for real chemical work. The main alchemical goal shown here is harvesting something called rose, or secret dew. And no, this isn't just standard rainwater. It's atmospheric moisture that's been heavily saturated with solar and lunar rays during spring mornings. For the practicing alchemist, this dew acts as a universal solvent. It contains a subtle nitre that can literally break down crude metals, completely avoiding the need for harsh, violent acids. Just picture yourself as a 17th century chemist actually following this recipe. First, you wait for the spring dawn. Then, you carefully spread these huge white linen sheets over the grass. Next, you catch the atmospheric moisture as it settles. And finally, you wring those soaking sheets out into your vessels. Remember those fishermen's nets we were just looking at in the middle ring? Well, in real, practical terms, they actually symbolize those literal white linen sheets used by early chemists to catch the morning dew. Mind-blowing, right? Let's flip the script again. Section 4, the inner transformation, Jungian psychology. Now, what's really interesting about this is that centuries later, the pioneering psychologist Carl Jung looked at these exact same symbols and realized they map absolutely perfectly to the human mind. So this is our second analytical lens, Jungian psychological alchemy. Through this psychological framework, that concept of prima materia, it becomes the primordial chaos representing our own personal and collective unconscious. And that intense image of Neptune in his dark, turbulent waters, that is actually the human ego trying to navigate the chaotic and largely unmapped depths of our own unconscious mind. So suddenly these literal gods in the sky transform into deep inner realities. Jupiter and Juno aren't just grand cosmic forces anymore. They represent the inner marriage of opposites within us. This is the whole anima and animus dynamic, beautifully illustrating the deep psychological integration that's required to have a healthy, balanced human psyche. And what about our fishermen in this context? Well, in psychology, this brilliantly represents the vital practice of active imagination. I mean, fishing in the stream of the unconscious is just such a perfect, intuitive metaphor. The fishermen represent making the active, conscious effort to catch fleeting insights, streams, and intuitions, which are represented by the birds and the fish, and pull them all the way up into our conscious awareness. Okay, let's bring it all together. Section 5, the Hermetic cosmos, as above, so below. This final lens takes the physical laboratory and the psychological mind and ties them elegantly together through the grand unifying theory of Hermetic philosophy. The ancient Emerald Tablet famously states, "Its father is the sun, its mother the moon, the wind carried it in its belly." When you really examine plate 3 of the Mutus Liber, it hits you. It is essentially a direct visual translation of this exact Hermetic axiom. The imagery matches the ancient text perfectly, without using any words. The plate demonstrates this beautifully structured, cascading flow of divine energy, which we call the descent of light. Just watch how it falls. It originates up in the fiery realm of the gods, with Jupiter and Juno. Then it filters down through the air, carried by those birds. It settles into the water with Neptune, until finally it reaches Earth, where it is actually captured by the adept working in the field. When we matrix all these concepts together, it proves just how much layered, incredibly complex information was masterfully packed into one single image. Depending on the lens you use, whether it's the laboratory, the mind, or the cosmos, the exact same visual symbols, like the fisherman's nets or the concentric rings, reveal a completely different yet beautifully interconnected truth. It is an entire, multifaceted philosophy compressed into a single, masterful engraving. Truly genius. Which brings us to our big conclusion today. If a 17th century engraving can hold this much layered meaning, literally mapping out the cosmos, the laboratory, and the human mind without using a single printed word, well, it makes you wonder, right? What hidden truths are waiting to be decoded in the visual language of the world around you today? Keep looking at the world with the curious eyes of an adept, and I will see you in our next explainer.